Have you heard the argument that our ancestors used to consume sprouted grains due to the fact that their ancient farming techniques sprouted the grain, thus they consumed sprouted grains? Well, in this video, we're gonna bust this myth because this is just simply not true. Hey everyone, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel, we talk all about real whole grains from a biblical perspective. So you know I love busting some myths, and this one is a bit different because this is just some information that I have seen floating around. I even get comments in regards to this about sprouted grains. I have done a video before about phytic acid. I'll link that below, where I kind of go into sprouted grains because, you know, there is a time where that may be useful to do, but it is not the rule. Specifically in this video, I'm just going to be laying to rest this misinformation that's floating around about ancient farming techniques sprouting grains. I'm going to talk about where this information I believe came from. We're going to be talking about how it is just not true from a common sense perspective, from a historical perspective, and also a biblical perspective. So first off, let's talk about where this came from. The biggest source that I found is actually mentioned in The Maker's Diet by Jordan Rubin. I do recommend this book. Especially if you do have severe health issues like Crohn's disease. Jordan Rubin cured his extremely advanced Crohn's disease by consuming a biblical-based diet. So fascinating book. I'll link it below. Except he quoted a man in here saying that sprouted grains were consumed because of ancient farming techniques. That is simply not true. So let's find out what he actually said. This is on page 138 to 139. I'm just going to read from here. And he's quoting Dr. Howell. So I believe Dr. Howell, according to the cliff note or the footnotes here, wrote a book called Enzyme Techniques, I think, or Enzyme Methods, something like that. So he's quoting him. And it states, while modern techniques for harvesting crops definitely multiplied efficiency exponentially, they have also decreased the nutrition value to the same degree. Okay, Dr. Howell noticed that the old harvesting techniques helped preserve and enhance the nutrition value of the grain. All right, still listening. After cutting the mature grains in the field, farmers would gather the stalks and loosely bind them upright in sheaves and let them stand overnight in the field before threshing them, which is removing the grain from the grass stalks, the following day. So far, so good. Then he continues, this allowed the grains to germinate or sprout. And now we have fallen off the rails. He then goes on to say about what happens when the grains germinate, that it neutralizes the phytates or enzyme inhibitors the Creator put on exterior of the seeds, which God did put on the seeds. The seeds are activated, making all the nutrition within the seed available for digestion. These germinated seeds of wheat and barley and the bread made from them were of great importance in biblical times. This living staff of life supplied easily digestible, life-giving carbohydrates. Skip down a little bit. And the grains they did eat were healthy, sprouted, or germinated grains with lower amounts of disaccharides and phytates. So I think it's Dr. Howell. This is the main source that I found of Dr. Howell being cited, stating that ancient farming techniques caused the wheat to germinate or sprout while in the field, thus they consumed it. Now, if you've been on this channel long enough, you probably already know a huge issue with this. But let's first, before we get into the common sense way of debunking this, let's actually look at, does the Bible say anything about this? And do we have any sources of how they did harvest back before we had our modern techniques? So first of all, let's look at the Bible. This is the source that I always go to first because God's word is true and he knows a lot more about the grains that he created than we do. And there are things in the Bible that definitely debunk this. The first one is we are going to go to 1 Samuel 12. So this is Old Testament, so way long ago. This is actually 1 Samuel 12. The context here is Israel, the nation of Israel, has demanded a king. And God said, This is bad. It is wicked. I am your king. You should not be asking for a king. However, they wanted to be like the other nations. And Samuel in chapter 12, the prophet Samuel, the judge, he is addressing Israel saying, fine, here is the king. And then he's telling them, be sure to still fear the Lord and serve him. It'll go great. You reject the Lord, it'll go bad. And then he states, now again, he states over and over again that it is a wicked thing for them to ask for a king. So the nation of Israel has sinned against God, asking for a king. And verse 16 in 1 Samuel 12, it says, now therefore, Samuel is speaking, now therefore stand and see the great thing which the Lord will do before your eyes. Is it not wheat harvest today? I will call unto the Lord, and he shall send thunder and rain, that ye may perceive and see that your wickedness is great, which we have done in the sight of the Lord, and asking you a king. So this was a bad thing, that rain was coming on the day that they were harvesting wheat. And you have to ask yourself, why? Is it just an inconvenience? The fact of, we can't harvest today. We have to wait until another day. No, it was known that rain, you do not harvest grains in the rain because they cannot get wet. Let us continue. Is anywhere else in the Bible agree with this? That, it wasn't just an inconvenience. Proverbs 26:1 states, as snow in summer and as rain in harvest, so honor is not seemly for a fool. So the Bible, just in two passages, there is possibly more, talks about that it is a bad thing for it to rain during harvest. Specifically, it even says wheat harvest, because you cannot have your grains get wet. Now, it doesn't say why your grains shouldn't get wet, but that's because they all knew why your grains couldn't get wet. So that is some biblical references that we have debunking this myth. And we have some historical ones as well that may actually surprise you. I actually love the Little House on the Prairie series, and I have the whole set. This is literally as old as I am, so if you get them now, probably not look like that. But Farmer Boy actually talks about this. Now, these are historical fiction books, where historical fiction is, the order of Laura Ingalls Wilder's life is a little out of order. Some things were left out, but ultimately, what they're saying is accurate, especially in Farmer Boy. They actually go into their harvesting, how they were to harvest, and just their year, and how they provided for their family with their farm. And there's some information in here that might surprise you. If you actually go, now in my book, it is page 234, but it's in the chapter Early Harvest, if you want to look it up yourself. But they're talking about, now it is harvest time. And when it's harvest time, go, 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 go. There's no break. And he talks about that it was time to harvest the oats. And Almanzo, who is married to Laura Ingalls Wilder later on, he's a boy in this one, talking about how he needs to harvest the oats. They're doing it with their father, and it actually talks about how they are shocking the grain. So they are harvesting the oats, binding it up, and then it states that just before sunset, the reapers stopped reaping, and they all began shocking the sheaves, which shocking is where they're standing them upright. It states he stood 10 sheaves up on their stem ends, close together with all the heads of grain upward. Then he set 2 more sheaves on top and spread out their stems to make a roof over the 10 sheaves. And the reason they did this is it's listed before that all the cut oats must be shocked before dark, because they would spoil if they lay on the ground in the dew overnight. So there you have it. The reason why the grains could not get wet is just the dew alone, not even rain. The dew would actually cause them to spoil overnight, almost immediately, which means your entire harvest is lost. And then later on that day, it's either that day or the next day, they talk about harvesting the wheat. And they're also harvesting their beans. And it states that while Almanzo and his sister were harvesting the navy beans, Father and Royal hauled the shocked grain to the barns. So they were getting, and this was the same day that they were harvesting it. So they definitely tried to harvest the grains and then get them into shelter, but they kind of had a plan B. That's why they shocked it. So just in case they just could not get to all of it in one day, shocking it prevented any sort of moisture getting onto those kernels of grains. Otherwise, it would spoil. And here's where we get to the common sense part of this, is we all know, and I've talked about it before, and if you've been working with grains long enough, and especially if you farm them, you know your grains cannot get wet. As soon as your grains get wet, they're going to start to germinate or sprout, which means you need to either plant them or consume them almost immediately because they will not store. They harvested their wheat once a year. This is why we have harvest festivals, the county fair here in the United States. This is why we did these things, because they caused to celebrate that they had a good harvest that they're storing up for the rest of the year. So in Farmer Boy, this is talking about, basically 1 year in their life, and they are harvesting their wheat once. They're harvesting their oats one time. So you're harvesting enough for it to store for the year, hopefully longer, to get you to the next harvest. And we also see this in the story of Joseph. You've heard me mention this before. They were storing up grains for 7 years to last 7 more years in the famine. They could not do this if their grains were already sprouted, germinated, if they got wet. Just try it yourself. Wet some grains at home, and you're going to see really fast how quickly they're going to mildew, how quickly they're going to go bad, and they smell pretty bad as well. So hopefully this was helpful, at least really debunking this misinformation that's out there about the ancient farming practices sprouting the grains. Now, again, I do know that at times there's times to sprout grains. I do know that our ancestors, they used to soak their grains, I think, just to help it cook faster, things like that. But as far as trying to prove that we must consume sprouted grains because of ancient farming techniques, it's simply just not true. I'll be sure to link the phytic acid video down below where I talk about times to sprout your grains and also why phytic acid is not the bad guy that the sprouted grain people say that it is. As always, I hope y'all have a wonderful day and week, and I'll see you next week. Bye.